enjoy our first speaker, Mr. Michael Jastroch.
Yay me! Hello! How is everyone this evening? Good? Awesome. So, I did not commit my little TED Talk here to memory. So I'll be reading it. And I entitled this, it's about improv. I entitled this, The Importance of Doing, or The Unified Field Theory of Bad Scene Work. Interior, Cold Town Theater, night. Two bearded 20-somethings in glasses, for the sake of anonymity, we'll call them Guy 1 and Guy 2, walk onto a 4x9 scrap of plywood. Guy 1 half pretends to chop vegetables. Guy 2 watches Guy 1 chop vegetables for a few beats and then says, "You sure are chopping vegetables absurdly." Guy 1 responds, "Yes, I am chopping these vegetables in an absurd way. Just a few moments ago, I was also doing something weird that was slightly different than this." And this conversation goes back and forth for about 3 minutes, talking about all the funny things that happened, and then there's a sweep edit. Another scene. Interior hideout theater, night. Two imps wearing corsets walk into a much nicer piece of plywood. The first imp says, "Today is the day that something important will happen to us." And the second responds, "Yes, this thing that will happen will cause us to grow and change." This continues for some time. People talk about their feelings. A story happens, then the lights go down. We spend a lot of time agonizing over the little differences between game-based and narrative improv. But I'd argue that both of these super fake scenes that I totally created for the sake of rhetoric suck for the same exact and completely fixable reason that all scenes that suck for. Nothing happened. Zero, zilch, nada. Not a single thing in those scenes happened. In the game scene, two people came out and made with the funny by talking about all the funny cuckoo things. And they talked about the funny stuff, but nothing funny actually happened in the scene. It's like watching a highlight reel of a much funnier scene that happened somewhere off stage in a different show. In the narrative scene, two people came out and tried to tell an engaging story via boring exposition. If we were writing a screenplay, these kinds of scenes would be the very first scenes to go. If we were a novelist, our editor would have run these scenes through with red ink. If we were in a creative writing 101 class, our teacher would have reminded us of a very fundamental, important truth. Show, don't tell. To put it another way, if you've gone down your premise-based checklist and you're not getting any laughs, it's because you're talking about the funny thing instead of doing the funny thing. If you think that the audience's complete silence was because they were really into your intense emotions and acting prowess, I've got some terrible news. There was a really big chance that actually they were just bored shitless watching you. Watching you wallow in self-indulgent, what my acting teacher calls schmacting. And I'm sorry, I feel pretty strongly about this, but I'm not really sorry, and I'm sorry that I'm not sorry. I bring good news, though. There's an easy to implement solution to fix this problem of nothing happening in our scenes. It's a trick that writers and good actors have known since the dawn of time. It's an easy fix to make 95% of your scenes go well every single time. It's a powerful weapon in the war against boredom. Make the characters in the scene do something. Right now, in this exact precise moment in time, not to talk about doing something in the future or having done something in the past, but right now, this very moment, fucking do something in the scene. Example, let's say you wanted to do a scene about crashing your dad's car. I like how I did that as if it's a spontaneous example I just came up with off the top of my head. Didn't prepare, put a lot of thought into today. Well, just off the top of my head, a scene about, let's say you want to do a scene about crashing your dad's car. First impulse, the first way most people will start that scene is they'll come out and say, to give the initiation, "Dad, I crashed your car." It's not a horrible initiation. There's a lot of information there. There's some nugget of something fun, but it's not great either because you're immediately talking about something that happened in the past outside of this moment in time. That's exposition. Exposition is boring. And now we have to do a ton of work to create something interesting at the top of that scene. We have to do more work, and more work means less fun, means more opportunity for the audience to lose interest in what you're doing on stage. And the audience losing interest means a bigger likelihood of you doing a shitty scene, which means a bigger likelihood of you hating yourself after the show. and eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Instead, we might start the scene with some sort of action. For example, like the initiation. Dad, I'm having trouble controlling the car. That's a great initiation meme. Okay, that's good. It's a little better. Suddenly there are stakes that are immediate. Something's happening right here in this moment. We know that there's a son and a dad in a car, and the son's having trouble controlling it. It's happening right here in this point in time. Something interesting is happening that's worth watching, but we're not quite there yet, so I'm going to give that scene start a B. Solid B. It's not a scene yet because a scene involves two or more people doing something. You haven't involved the other character in what you're doing. So it's not a scene yet. You've done something, but not to, with, or inside the other human being that you're sharing the stage with. So another initiation might be, Dad, grab the steering wheel, I can't control it. I'll give that initiation an A. I'll give myself an A for that initiation. It's good. You're trying to get your dad to grab the wheel of your car, and suddenly you have a scene with two or more people interacting in an interesting way. It's got a relationship, and it has the nuggets of a game and or an engaging story. And while I'm at it, let me also fix the vegetable chopping scene from the beginning of my little speech here. Guy 1 is chopping vegetables. Guy 2 is watching, and instead of pointing out the funny way guy number 1 is chopping the vegetables, if he says something like, I have to get those vegetables out because there's very important dinner guests, you're being too sloppy. And then he gingerly moves the vegetables onto a tray, shaking his head. Suddenly, that simple action between the two people has created something interesting and watchable, as opposed to boring and unwatchable. I just fixed 2 made-up scenes that I did. Good. So we're told this stuff a whole bunch in improv classes, right? We're told to do scenes where we make active choices. We're told to work on our space work. We're told to give ourselves an active activity to do at the top of the scene. And yet, for most of us, as we kind of go through classes, the problem that I see as a teacher coming up time and time again are just scene after scene where literally nothing happens. Just two people talking at each other in a void, hoping something interesting happens. You're told to make these active choices time and time again, but you don't consistently carry these notes into practice as you start to improvise. I kind of wonder why that's the case. Why we're told this time and time in classes, but why don't we consistently act on it in the first few years that we're learning how to improvise? When it comes to improv, I think it probably has a lot to do with fear. We didn't get a script for the scene, and we're worried that if we make a big choice, we're going to create some sort of insurmountable scene paradox, and all of improv will come tumbling down, and the theater will burn down, and everyone will flee into the woods in a panic, and everyone will hate us. At least that's what goes through my head when I'm on stage right now. But the reality is that all drama and comedy and storytelling, all of it actually comes from the fun, unpredictable, and sometimes conflicting intersections of characters with different agendas operating at cross purposes. So the very thing that we're subconsciously trying to avoid, contradicting each other, is the very thing that is actually going to make these scenes go. We also don't act on this note to make active choices, to do things in our scene consistently, because the whole idea of doing is masquerading inside of another lesson under an assumed name when we learn the term crow. Crow is an improv term that we learned. Stands for character, relationship, objective, where, emotion, a bunch of stuff that just means what's the scene's deal. But usually most teachers that I've seen or taken, they kind of tend to gloss over the O part, the objective. The objective, your character's objective, is what drives the action of the scene. It is what the doing is about. And it's hiding there in plain sight. But usually a lot of teachers focus most of their lessons around creating fun comedy characters, strong relationships, reacting emotionally, space work. They focus on all the other letters of crow, except for the poor O gets ignored. But that's actually the most important part of the scene, the objective. Your objective drives what you're doing in the scene, what the characters are doing in the scene. And the doing defines the character and creates a relationship. And the act of doing produces emotions. I think this lesson might be glossed over for a few reasons by teachers. Maybe it's because the word objective is too soft, it's too mushy. It makes for a good acronym. It spells out the word crow. But I like to use the word need. What's your character's need? What does your character need out of this scene, out of the world, out of the other person they're sharing the stage with? I like to tell people to make the very first choice that they make in every single scene what they need from the other person. It can be physical. I need this guy to give me a hot dog. Classic scene start. It can be emotional. I need this guy to give me respect. And then your job as an improviser is to go get that thing. Human beings are like Sims. Every one of us has little status bars above our head for food, shelter, love, cleanliness, sometimes pornography. And when those need meters kind of flash above our heads, it causes us to do stuff to get those needs fulfilled. It drives our action. And when we meet, when we have another need another person can fulfill, we have meaningful interactions with those people. And meaningful interactions are very watchable and interesting. So try it for a while in your scene work. Consciously try to make the first line of your scene something along the lines of, I need fill in the blank from you, or I need you to fill in the blank. And when you get that muscle memory ingrained, you can try less clunky dialogue, maybe more subtle ways of communicating those needs. And then when some time passes, maybe you can just feel the need, what you need from the other person in your gut. But by focusing on your character's needs, on the doing, that has a few other benefits as well. Focusing on the doing, first of all, it more closely resembles the way we actually behave in everyday life. By focusing on our activity, we get closer to actually living the scene that's happening as opposed to being trapped in our head trying to be clever. Real people operate because they're driven by needs, and we can act that same way on stage when we're making shit up. The other thing is that doing stuff on stage with your hands, getting in your environment, it distracts the thinky part of your brain and helps us to stay out of our own way as actors, as performers. By focusing on action, our acting becomes more truthful. There are a lot of performers out there who love to revel in the emotions of their scenes. The kind of people that get off stage and say like, oh, did you see how powerful my feelings were in that scene? Did you see me cry? I cried real tears. I felt something. I've actually heard this from improvisers. Congratulations. Congratulations. But the reality is emotions are always a byproduct of our actions and our interactions. They flow from what we're doing. They flow from what's being done to us. They flow from our needs being met or not met. Anything else, any other method of acting is less than truthful. It's melodrama for the sake of melodrama. It's emoting for the sake of emoting. It's masturbatory. Good acting does not equal emotions. Good acting is truthful behavior in imaginary circumstances. And I'd argue that good acting, truthful behavior, is doubly important when you're doing a scene about farting space monkeys. I'd argue that, and I have. And don't just take my word for it. Listen to this quote from a famous actor. For me, acting is doing. That actor, Pierce Brosnan. I Googled that. But I'm also not making this up. I wish these thoughts that I'm kind of spewing out here, I wish I could take credit for them. Generations of actors, acting teachers, screenwriters, novelists, famous acting trainers, schools of theatrical thought, they've all known this. And I think all of us in this room also know this because even if we've never really thought about it before, every time we've rolled our eyes at a scene that happens in a movie, every dumb, shitty, dumb, boring boredom that ever bored, even boredom itself, the very definition of boredom probably involves the words "nothing happened." It is bad scene work is always. I'll make a bold statement. Always a product of nothing happening in the moment. There's nothing happening. It's just people talking and having exposition and talking about something happening outside of the here and now. So to sum up, do the following thing every single time and you'll almost never do a shitty scene again. That's my promise because I've put it into practice. Come out, look at the other person, decide what you need from them, and then do stuff to get it. Congratulations, I just fixed every bad scene that you'll ever do. The end.